So this is the fat woman they allow to work in a company like this? If they hire me today, you will be the first person I sack.
You still haven't changed. Priye wok ebi pitas we wokama.
Excuse me. How do you know I be my name?
So this is the fat woman they allowed inside a fine company like this one. I swear to God, if they hire me here today, you will be the very first person I will sack. She said it loudly, in front of 4 strangers waiting for their own interviews, and she laughed. She had no idea that the woman she was laughing at owned 40% of that company, and was about to walk into the room where her interview panel was waiting. My name is Ibinabo, but everybody calls me IBI. This is not a story I invented to make myself feel important. This is what happened to me in Port Harcourt, over the space of almost 7 years, and I will tell it exactly the way it happened, even the parts that still embarrass me. I have always been a big woman. Not chubby. Not curvy, the way people say it nicely online. Big. Heavy. The kind of big that makes strangers stare 1 second too long in the market, that makes a tailor sigh before she even brings out her tape. I stopped being ashamed of it a long time ago. But there was a season when other people's mouths nearly convinced me that my size was the biggest problem in my life. It was not. My biggest problem was that I was renting a room from a family who had decided, long before I ever did anything wrong, that I did not deserve dignity. The house stood on a quiet street in D-line, 2 floors, yellow paint fading to the color of old newspaper, a black gate that stayed chained even in the afternoon. The landlord was Chief Wakoma. He introduced himself with the title first, always. His wife, Madame Abier, ran that compound like a checkpoint. And their only daughter, Pri, was 20 when I moved in, studying at a private university her father's money had pushed her into, home every weekend, and always present whenever I needed her not to be. I rented the small self-contained behind the main building, 1 room, a corner for my stove, a bathroom I shared with nobody. I worked as an attendant in a pharmacy at Mile 1, and every naira I saved outside my rent went to my mother in ABA, for her diabetes medicine. So no, I was not rich. But I was proud. I paid my rent complete and on time, and I kept to myself. Pride disliked me from the very first week. She would pass me in the yard and say things just loud enough for me to hear, never loud enough for me to confront her without looking like the troublemaker. See as her body plenty, like person way never rest from chop, and her friends would laugh. What was I supposed to do, fight a landlord's daughter over her mouth? I needed that room. So I swallowed it, week after week, the way you swallow food that has gone slightly sour, because you are too hungry to throw it away. It continued for almost a year. Small comments. Small humiliations. Nothing big enough on its own to report. That is how some people torture you. Not with one heavy blow, but with hundreds of small ones, so that if you ever complain, everybody says, is that all? Why are you so sensitive? I remember one Sunday, returning from church in my good white lace, passing Pri and 2 of her friends on the veranda, a whisper, then laughter. I had learned to read laughter the way other people read letters, and that laughter had my name written all over it. Standing over my pot that evening, I asked myself, what exactly had I done to this girl? The only crime I could find was that I existed, in a body she had decided was funny, in a corner of her father's compound she felt entitled to control. Then came the night that changed everything between us, and not in the direction anybody would expect. It was a Saturday. Chief Wakoma had attended his chieftaincy meeting, and the family gathered in the compound afterwards. Generator humming, pepper soup on the fire. I closed late from the pharmacy, reached the gate around 9, and went straight to my room. Around 11, I heard shouting, the kind that wakes an entire street. I stepped out and met chaos. Madame Abier was screaming that her coral beads were missing, the heavy royal set with the gold clasp, worth more than 6 months of my salary. She had removed them after the gathering and placed them beside her mirror. Now they were gone. Pri was crying, actually crying, saying somebody had entered the house and stolen from them. And then Madame Abier's eyes landed on me, standing in my nightgown. "You," she said. "It must be you." I told her I had been at work until 9, that I went straight to my room. She did not want to hear it. She said, "Since when do poor people ever tell the truth when gold is involved?" I felt something in my chest crack. Not break yet, crack. They searched my room that night, all 3 of them, plus the gateman they woke as a witness. They turned my mattress, scattered my box of clothes, even opened my bag of Gary. Nothing, because I had never touched their beads. And still, no apology. Chief Wakoma said, "Maybe you have already hidden it outside." Madame Abier said, "God will judge the wicked." Pry said nothing, but I saw the small satisfaction resting in her eyes. The same eyes that had been crying so dramatically minutes before. 4 days later, I found the beads. Not because I was searching. The sky turned heavy that afternoon, and the housemaid begged me to help rush the washing in from the line before the rain, because Madame had traveled to the market. As I unpegged Pry's things, something heavy slipped out of a knotted headscarf, and landed on my foot. Coral. Deep red. A gold clasp, exactly as Madame Abier had described. I stood frozen, holding those beads in my palm, the same beads they had scattered my entire room for. I will be honest with you. For one moment, I thought about knotting them back inside that scarf and pretending I saw nothing, letting that family drown quietly in their own suspicion. But something in me, maybe foolishness, maybe simply the way my mother raised me, refused. I picked up the beads, walked to the main house, and knocked. I should have known that in some houses, the truth does not set you free. It only hands the powerful something new to punish you for. I explained everything calmly. Chief Wakoma turned the beads over like a man checking whether they were fake. But it was Pry's reaction that told me what was coming. She started crying again, louder. "Daddy, I am sorry. I borrowed it for a friend's photo shoot. I forgot to return it, please do not be angry." And for 1 second, I actually believed the apology in that room was about to reach me. Instead, Chief Wakoma turned to me with a face colder than Harmattan wind, and said the words I will never forget. "So, it is you that has been going through my daughter's belongings." I nearly laughed, except nothing about it was funny. I explained that the scarf fell open while I was helping the maid. He did not want that version. He wanted a version where I was the villain, where the fact that I now knew his daughter's secret made me dangerous, not innocent. Madame Abier jumped straight into the new story. First she wanted to steal, now she is searching my daughter's clothes for something to use against this family. Your rent dawn almost expire, we shall see. It did not matter that the beads were found because of me, returned because of me. In that house, doing the right thing became the very evidence they used to condemn me. From that week, life became slow torture. Pry told half the street I was the thief who only confessed out of fear. Neighbors stopped greeting me warmly. Madame Abier spoke to me only through the housemaid. And Chief Wakoma began treating my rent as a weapon. When my rent expired 3 months later, I had the complete amount ready. He counted it slowly, licking his thumb between the notes, then pushed it back across the table. "I am not renewing your rent," he said, without looking up. I told him I had never once been late in 2 years. He finally raised his head, with something almost enjoyable in his expression. "You are the one who searches my daughter's belongings. I do not want that kind of person under my roof. Pack your load by the end of this week." I begged. God forgive me. I begged that man, with my rent money still lying on the table between us. I told him my mother was sick, that I had nowhere to go. That I had only tried to be honest. He listened with folded arms, then said the sentence I still hear late at night, when old wounds decide to visit. Honesty from a poor person always looks like a threat, to people who have something to hide. Pack your things. Pry watched from the balcony as I carried my boxes out 5 days later, arms folded exactly like her father's, a small satisfied smile on her face. I looked up once, just once, and said nothing. What is left to say to someone who let you carry her shame, and then smiled while you paid for it with your home? If you are still with me, this is where the story begins to turn, slowly, in a direction none of us saw coming. But before I continue, if you have ever been blamed for something you did not do, or punished simply for telling the truth, touch that like button right now, because this story is about to show you exactly what quiet patience can build. I had a friend from secondary school named Gift. She was the first person I called that week, crying into my phone. Gift did not ask too many questions. She simply said, "Come." That single word saved me more than she will ever know. Her place was one room in Diobu, shared with her younger sister, where she also ran a small catering business from 2 coolers and 1 stubborn stove. It was smaller than everything I had just lost. But inside that cramped room was something I had not felt in the Wakoma compound for over a year. Peace. Those months were not easy. I lost the pharmacy job because transport swallowed more than the work paid. I served at Gift's weekend events until my feet throbbed, fried chin-chin until the smell of hot oil lived in my hair. There was one week I fell sick with malaria, and it was Gift's younger sister who bought my drugs, with money she had been saving for a pair of shoes. Real kindness from people who have almost nothing teaches you something that comfort never can. But something in me had changed since I walked out of that gate. The humiliation refused to leave quietly, so I turned it into fuel. A church near Gift's place ran evening classes almost for free, bookkeeping, typing, spreadsheets. I threw myself into that program like my life depended on it, because in many ways, it did. The instructor, an older man called Deacon Amati, told me one evening, "Ibinabo, you have the head of somebody who refuses to remain small." I did not understand him then. I understand him completely now. It took almost 2 years before I got my first real office job, a records and front desk clerk at a marine services yard in Transamati. Small pay, but steady. I worked harder than that job required, because working hard was the only way I knew to prove Chief Wakoma's sentence wrong. That job is where I met Tanya. He was a client, the owner of a growing industrial catering company that fed oil workers in the camps and on the water. He came in for contract meetings, and somehow always ended up at my desk first, asking questions that had nothing to do with business. "Have you eaten today? Because this Port Harcourt sun can finish somebody." Small questions. Human questions. Nobody in the Wakoma compound had asked me even one of them in 2 whole years. I was suspicious at first. Big men who suddenly notice quiet office girls rarely carry good intentions. But Tanya was patient in a way I was not used to. He never rushed anything. He asked before he assumed. We married 3 years after we met, a small wedding, nothing like the parties Madame Ibier wore her coral beads to, but it was mine, and it was real. And my mother, thank God, lived to see it, and danced slowly with her walking stick at her only daughter's wedding. By then, Tanya's company had grown into a full catering and camp services firm, with offices in Port Harcourt and Warri. I walked beside him through the building years. And eventually, my name entered the documents too. Not as a wife added for decoration, but as a director, holding 40% I had earned with my own hands, hour by hour, year by year. I am not telling you this to boast. I am telling you so that what happened next makes sense. 6 years after I carried my boxes out of that compound, I was in the reception of our Port Harcourt office on an ordinary Tuesday, before a round of interviews. 4 candidates were waiting outside. I stepped out to call the next name. And that was when I saw her. Pri Wakoma. Older. Polished. Dressed in a blazer that probably cost more than the yearly rent I once paid her father. But her face had not changed, the same sharp eyes, the same tilt of the chin that always arrived before her cruelest comments. She sat third in the row, scrolling through her phone with the confidence of somebody who assumed the job was already hers. She did not recognize me. Why would she? The last time she saw me, I was carrying boxes out of her father's gate while she smiled from a balcony. Now I stood there in tailored clothing, a company badge on my chest. When her turn came, I called. Miss Prywakoma. She looked up, confused for half a second, then stood, looked me over from head to toe exactly the way her mother used to, and said, loudly enough for every waiting candidate to hear. Wait, is this not, you are still like this? As fat as you still are, this company allows you to stand in front, calling names? A short, ugly laugh escaped her. One of the other candidates actually looked away, embarrassed for her. I said nothing. I simply looked at her, the way I had looked up at that balcony 6 years earlier, then turned and walked back into the inner office without a single word. Imagine her confusion, because I explained nothing. She probably believed she had embarrassed some receptionist who would go and cry in the staff toilet. She had no idea I had just walked into the room where her interview panel was seated. She had no idea that the man at the head of that table, reviewing her CV with quiet, unreadable eyes, was my husband. She had absolutely no idea that the woman she had just mocked in front of 4 strangers owned 40% of the company she was begging for a job. And if you think that is the twist, stay with me, because it is not even the biggest one. If this story is holding you the way I believe it is, subscribe right now, because you do not want to miss where it goes from here. Inside the room, Tanya leaned close and asked quietly, "You good?" I nodded, though my hands were not entirely steady under that table. Years of small humiliations do not simply evaporate because you now sit on the other side of the desk. Pry walked in composed, wearing that practiced interview smile, completely unaware. The interview began normally, and honestly, she was articulate. Then Tanya asked a simple, almost throwaway question. Tell me about a time you corrected a mistake of yours, even when it cost you something. She hesitated, then delivered a small, rehearsed story about a group project in university. A fine answer. It was also, I knew for certain, not the truest story she could have told. I do not know what pushed me to speak. Maybe 6 years of silence finally reaching its limit. I leaned forward and asked, in the same calm tone the panel had used all morning. Have you ever allowed another person to carry the blame for something you did, and if so, what did it cost them? The room went quiet in a very specific way. Her smile faltered. Her eyes moved to me, really looked at me, and I watched the recognition finally land, slow and complete, like a stone sinking through water. I am sorry, have we met? She asked, though her voice had already lost its confidence. We have, I said simply. You were 20. Your mother's coral beads disappeared one Saturday night. Your father searched my room in front of the gateman. 4 days later, I found those beads knotted inside your headscarf on the clothesline, and I returned them to your parents myself. Your father threw me out of his compound within the week, for the crime of being honest. You could have heard a pin drop. Our coordinator's pen stopped moving. Tanya sat back slowly, quiet, patient, dangerous in his stillness. Pry looked around that room, searching for an ally, and found none. Her hands began twisting the strap of her bag. I was a child, she started. Children do foolish things. Are you really going to punish me now, as an adult, for something I did at 20? And on its own, that was not an unreasonable question. People grow. But growth is proven by how you treat people when you believe nobody important is watching, and 20 minutes earlier, in a reception full of strangers, she had shown all of us exactly how much growing she had done. I am not judging the girl you were at 20, I said quietly. I am evaluating the woman you are this morning, in this building, when you thought you were only laughing at a stranger. Her face moved through confusion, denial, and finally, the thing I had waited 6 years to see. Shame. Real shame. Not performance. She tried again, my father, he was the one who, and I stopped her gently. Your father put an innocent woman on the street to protect you. You watched from the balcony while I carried my boxes out of a home I was never once late on. You never said sorry. And this morning, you mocked me again, without even recognizing the woman you were laughing at. She started crying. Actual tears this time. And for one brief second, some old tired part of me almost pitied her. Then I remembered the sound of her laughter in that reception, and the feeling passed. Tanya finally spoke, his voice level and professional. "Miss Wakoma, this company values honesty, and how people treat those they believe hold less power than themselves. We will not be moving forward with your application." She tried, desperately, to salvage something, apologizing properly this time, stumbling over her words, saying she was a different person now, that her family had fallen on hard times since her father's businesses collapsed. That this job meant more than we could understand. And here is the part that still sits strangely in my chest. I believed some of it. I believe people can change. I believe it about myself, after all. But belief in change, and trust rebuilt from nothing, are two very different things, and an interview room is not the place to test which one is true. I did not gloat. No long speech about karma. I simply stood, straightened my jacket, and said one final thing before I left that room. I hope you find a place that allows you to become better than the girl who laughed while I lost my home, but it will not be here. Pry left the building that day without the job. And I later heard, through an old neighbor, that Chief Wakoma lost the compound itself 2 years later. Banks, bad guarantees, debts nobody fully understood. Madame Ibier moved in with a relative in Yenagoa. And the house where I once begged for 5 more days now belongs to strangers who will never know what happened under its roof. I did not celebrate their downfall. There is no joy in watching a family collapse, even a family that once collapsed something inside of you first. What I felt was something quieter than joy. Relief. The relief of finally understanding that the years I spent being humiliated, evicted, and blamed for another person's dishonesty had not broken anything permanent in me. They had only delayed something that eventually arrived. My grandmother used to say that the river in our land forgets nothing, it only waits for the right season, then it returns whatever was thrown inside it. I did not understand her then. I understand her completely now. If there is one thing I want you to carry from this story, it is this. The people who mock you while you are down are never imagining who you might become. They mistake your patience for weakness, your silence for defeat, your kindness for foolishness. But some of us are simply building quietly, in small rooms nobody bothers to check, until the day the very people who laughed at you need something only you can give. So let me ask you. If you were sitting in my chair that morning, would you have given Pry the job, or turned her away the way I did? Tell me honestly in the comments, because I read every single one. Be careful how you treat the people you think you have power over today. Because life has a habit of rearranging chairs when you least expect it. If this story touched something in you, please hit the like button and subscribe before you go. It truly helps this channel more than you know. And if you have ever had your own version of this moment, the moment somebody finally saw exactly who you had become, share it below. Thank you for staying till the end. I will see you in the next story.